Hello and welcome to this episode of the Healthy Business Podcast. And today I am very, very excited. I'm almost kind of bubbling to be chatting to my guest today. So today we are speaking to the wonderful Louise Westra, who is an award-winning naturopath, best-selling author, radio show host, and speaker. And I am really excited to be speaking to you today, Louise, because I think we've got a lot of synergies in the way that we think about the importance of health and just really how actually when we focus on that, not only do we start seeing changes in a positive way, but actually the ripple effect, the impact on that can be huge. So welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I, like you, I'm very excited because as I've already suggested, I feel like we've got a 3-part series in us based on what we've already said before we hit record, but we may need a trigger warning.
Yes. Who knows what's going to come out today? I know both of us are very passionate about this area, and before we came on live, we were chatting about how actually we could go off in lots of different tangents today, and potentially this could turn into quite a long podcast, or we split it down into some several ones. So keep your ears open for that. So tell us a little bit before we kind of delve into all the different areas that we're going to. One of the questions that I always start with my guests is, what does a healthy business mean to you? So I would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay, so for me, a healthy business, both for myself and for my clients that I'm working with, is one that matches their own vision of success. And I would suggest that, again, for me personally, and the people that I tend to attract and the clients that want to work with me to perhaps reposition that vision of success and their own personal contract with themselves, that success also incorporates an understanding that business should not be harmful to them, that over the course of time, they should not find their energy levels and their health dwindling and reducing as a result of the kind of pushing and the endeavors that so many people are investing in their business. That's not to say that we shouldn't be working hard, but ensuring that is very much negotiated with ourselves, with a curiosity, Sarah, and an increasing awareness around what's driving us, what are our Achilles heels in terms of, our stress response, and learning about ourselves on the journey to a more, I guess, holistic view of success in business.
I love that. And I think you're right. There's a couple of words in there. I think success is one of those things that means different things for different people, doesn't it? And that's okay. Like, I think we see, social media presents this world of what success should be like, but actually success is something really personal, and it can be totally up to you as to what your version of success is. The other word that you mentioned there was awareness. And I think that is a huge, very understated term, that actually if we are more aware of not just what we want in that version of success, but actually aware of ourselves, aware of our bodies, aware of our energy levels, aware of the impact on our decisions, our actions can have, not just on our own, personal perspective, our health, etc., but also on our business. Having that awareness can make a huge difference, can't it?
Absolutely. And I think, on that note, one of the things that I see, and I'm sure you've noticed it as well, is that female business owners in particular, and I say that because it's predominantly female entrepreneurs and high, functioning, high potential women that I'm working with, they usually have they have goals, they have a vision around what they want their business to be. They often have a vision around, annually what they want their travel plans to be, what they want their experiences with their families to be. They may also have an idea around, like a stretch goal for a particular, item of clothing or shoes or so on. And that's fantastic. What I see missing time and time again is anything about themselves, in the sense of, the biological fact that we've got this incredible body that is our vehicle for want of a better term, throughout this journey, but there's nothing in the mix to ensure that whilst all that doing is happening to meet those goals, understanding that there needs to be, you know, there's a seesaw, if you like, that with everything, all the energy that's put into the doing to create those things, to become that vision, to become a reality, that there are biological requirements that if we consistently exceed our capacity, we will ultimately be the cause of our own undoing.
Yeah, so true. And it's one of those phrases that we hear a lot, isn't it? Of kind of, you can't pour from an empty cup. And yes, you know, that's absolutely true. But I think when we're in business, we almost seem to forget that. And we're so, you know, I see so many people that are so focused on achieving those results, those financial milestones, whatever it is. But actually, as you said, recognizing that we need to do that ourselves. And if we're not there, how does that business perform at its level that we want it to? How do we get those results? And it's not until there's quite often a serious issue or something really, you know, makes us stop in our tracks before we start recognizing and realizing that and having that awareness.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. And I think, you know, one of the things that, again, we both notice is that this idea of not pouring from an empty cup, I think it's become a little bit trite in some ways, in the sense of what will happen is that, you know, an individual will push and push and push whilst not honoring that biological capacity. Again, this is not, I'm not talking from a place of judgment, but from, you know, doing this work for 20 years with people and wanting as many people as possible to truly avoid getting to that point where they are so depleted that it's much harder to come back from, to get, you know, the level of energy and, you know, the quality of life on a day-to-day basis that we would like. But what I see with that whole, you know, can't pour from an empty cup is that women get to this point where they have depleted themselves, and really when they stop to refill the cup, it's already largely empty. Whereas what we need is to not get to that point. And that's where partly the awareness and the understanding of ourselves and those biological needs and how we can meet those biological needs in the context of our individual life. And when I say life, I mean, you know, business is life. It's all life, isn't it? You know, like there's Absolutely. No delineation. It's all our life.
Yeah.
And so what's happening is that people will essentially collapse in a heap and take a day off from clients, let's say, and they feel awful about that because they don't want to let their clients down, or, you know, they cancel their day of whatever it is, recording or whatever, and they work from their bed. Like, what? That is not resting. Just because you are in your bed, you are not resting.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you on that one. And I think the first step is about having that awareness. And the second step is giving yourself permission to actually understand what it is that you need and putting that into your regular diary. That, you know, it isn't about just having a bath or taking half an hour for a cup of tea. Yes, that's brilliant and that's super important. But actually, if your energy levels are so depleted that you are collapsing in a heap or you're having to take a day off, looking at how you can actually manage your diary, your lives, looking at what your success goals look like. I mean, one of the things that I do with my clients is that when we're setting goals together, we have business goals, we have personal goals, and it's so intrinsic because, as you said, it is all life. And if you want it, I did a podcast recently on this of how actually I hate the term work-life balance, because for me it is all life, and actually it's about that freedom to choose. It's about that flexibility, and your version of that is what's important. So,
yeah, I mean, obviously I'm on the same page with you. I think one of the things that people aren't aware of is how much we're still paying a price for some of the kind of history of this, you know, the shift that we've had through the generations around that so-called work-life balance. Because if you look at, and this is, as I said, this is a really important thing for people to understand, so that they can start to unpick some of their own bias around productivity and why they are putting, being busy or doing all the things ahead of their own needs, is to understand that back in the 14th century, prior to the Industrial Revolution, we worked about 150 days a year. So that was our life. And granted, that was true for most of us who were peasants, because our focus was largely on making sure that we had food growing and enough to store for the winter. So through the summer months, spring, summer, where there's more light, naturally we worked longer days. But the economist Juliet Shaw says that we probably still only worked about 8 hours a day. And because we had a lot of festivals and annual holidays and stuff built into the annual calendar, the average person worked about 150 days a year.
Wow, I'd never heard that before.
Right. So then you fast forward to the mid-19th century, when a lot of people had been funneled into factory type, businesses. And of course, there was an absolute lack of regulation. So there was a complete unfettered brutality. And that's without even getting into, women getting their hair caught in mechanical, constructions and so on. But we then shifted to working the equivalent of 311 days a year. And that's kind of stuck with us. And what's happened since is that really embedded within the corporate structure of many businesses and organizations, and within us as individuals, is this idea that anything less than that kind of horrible, cruel environment is somehow weakness. And so many women that I work with, do, as I've said, they will put productivity and what they perceive, getting all the things done before their own needs. They will berate themselves if they're not doing it. And that's even if they are actually not well, experiencing, perhaps significant challenges, and also even in pain or, traumatized in some way. So we are still beating ourselves with the same stick that those people, beat people in the factories to keep them working and basically let them fall on a heap and just brush them aside and brought somebody else in. And, a lot of people say, oh, well, that's not true. Well, the next time you don't go to the toilet to actually meet a basic bodily function because you just want to finish something, that is a low grade hangover of that attitude.
That's fascinating. Isn't it amazing? Just those generational things can make a huge impact on how we think, or, as you say, the bias that we have on how we feel like we should be working.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as I say, it's something that is not well known, and like many of the kind of modus operandi that we're going around with, they are unconscious. They are driven from beliefs and values that we've picked up from our families growing up, when we had that period of significant imprinting over the course of our childhood, and equally, through our genetic imprinting, through the DNA of the generations that we know is carried, we carry with us.
Yeah.
So it's really important, if we are going to reconsider our vision of success, it's really paramount that we check ourselves in these situations where we are not stopping, simple things like not stopping to eat when we know our body needs to be refueled, not, as I say, going to the toilet to do a wee or a poo, getting back on the computer late at night when we know that really, that's going to probably have an impact on the quality of our sleep because of the, the exposure to some degree of blue light, the pushing and pushing that women do, even when they know that they are needing a break, and also the attachment that so many women have that, the more successful they appear to be in the kind of, I guess, patriarchal, accepted kind of way, the more they feel of value, the more their self-worth increases, rather than actually coming back to, well, how do I ensure that I have that internal feeling of being enough without, you know, the money in the bank? Or I'm not saying you shouldn't have the money in the bank, but all I'm saying is that, you know, our feeling of self-worth and value should be separate to what we're achieving in a financial way, because you shouldn't have to be the high priestess of exhaustion
No.
to really, you know, be successful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're probably on the same page that actually that version of success isn't about being the high priestess of exhaustion. I love that phrase. I'm going to use that one.
I'm going to trademark it.
Yes, I think it's brilliant. Which kind of leads me then into the book that you've written, which is all about you first. That's the title of it. And how, I guess, we shouldn't be apologetic for this. In fact, we should actually embrace this. And there are so many reasons why. So I'd love for you just to give us a little bit of info about what that book's about and kind of why, I guess, why the idea came from to write it.
Yeah, thanks. In some ways it came about because of the pandemic. It didn't, you know. I am a very, you've known me. I mean, I know we've not met in real life, but you've known me around for a bit. So you know that I'm inherently a very kind individual. At the same time, I'm also a mortal. So I do get frustrated when I see the same behaviors being perpetuated, as I'm sure everyone does, you know, in it with their own, you know, area of genius. And what I saw over the pandemic was, you know, this more and more this idea of, well, you know, we're going to be exhausted. Well, you know, naturally we're tired. And whilst I don't disagree with that, because it's been a very challenging time for all of us in all sorts of different ways, because nobody's had the same experience. Yeah. There was an article I saw that said women have lost their surge capacity, which is essentially a pre-burnout state. But my kind of rebuttal to that was most women have been in that state for most of their adult life, if not their young adult and even their higher teen years, because, like I say, we've got a society that's perpetuating this, do all the things, and if you're not doing them for yourself, then, you know, do them for other people. And I know we break that down, you know, that's definitely not the case often in the female entrepreneurial space. That is definitely, you know, something that a lot of us champion not doing. But it's understanding that unless or until you do position yourself into and integrate yourself into the center, if you like, as the fulcrum of your life, then you can expect to have energy levels that gradually decrease over the course of a lifetime, because we are living the equivalent of, you know, really we're living the equivalent of 2 to 3 lifetimes now compared to a few centuries ago, but we don't know how to keep up. And there's an argument to say that we shouldn't be trying, but that's perhaps you know, for some people that's too much of a shift. So I came back to this, well, I've always, you know, one of the things that I found myself doing with women, with my client Sarah, over the last almost 20 years is advocating for them, to give them permission to say, actually, no, your needs are paramount. Your needs are absolutely fundamental to the health of yourself, your family, your business, your wider family, your community, changing the world. If we're talking about bigger missions, you know, and I'm maybe going a little bit off topic, but if we come to, you know, wanting change for those women who want to stay in the workplace, who want to have better access to, you know, better paid maternity leave, childcare, more, all of us, you know, more accessible childcare and so on. Yes, we need those things to change, but unless or until women understand that if we don't take responsibility for ourselves, if we don't continue to overdo our biological needs and continue to build that capacity, we can't be the instigators of change that we want to be, because we haven't got anything left. And then it becomes detrimental to us, which is not okay.
Yeah.
So for anyone out there who really is on a mission to make big changes in the world, it does start with you. And I would obviously recommend that you buy my book, because it's a bargain for what, for nearly 20 years worth of work one-to-one with women, helping them go from feeling depleted and drained, helping them to go from this belief system that says, oh, well, I really shouldn't do anything until there's a really, like some kind of acute issue with my health, rather than learning to understand what the messages from our body are, and to continue to unpack essentially the patriarchy, because unless or until we do that within the structure of ourselves, then again, how do we recognize it in the wider world? And how do we have the capacity to make those big changes that really do need us to have an abundance of mental, physical, and emotional, energy? And that all comes from the biological capacity of ourselves, because the way that we feel, the way that we think, the way that we behave, the choices we make, the decisions we make are all at least partly driven by the level of function of our organs and our organ system. So unless or until we bring those biological needs into the space, into the conversation, we are never going to reach our full potential.
Oh, there's so many bits in there. So many amazing.
That went on.
No, that was amazing. And I think, yeah, firstly, if you haven't got a copy of the book, go and get it. It's called You First. And it's available on Amazon, and we'll make sure the links get into the show notes as well. So many things that I could kind of delve into from that as well. But I think, most of the people who listen to this podcast are business owners, aspiring business owners. And, you wouldn't think twice about investing in learning how to do something in your business, or learning how to, I don't know, get some tech support or something like that. But actually, as you said in the name of the book, You First, if we spent that time looking at how our energies can be at the, highest level of performance, and I don't mean performance in the sense of Olympic athlete, I mean performance for you. It's about how because then you're more productive, you're more efficient with your time, you make quicker decisions because you've got a clearer head. And that's what's really going to get you the results in a quicker way. And, if we purely look at this from a business perspective, I think the other thing that I would love to kind of explore with you is that, this isn't a finite process, is it? We can go in, we can kind of fix some of the things that might be most apparent, but actually, we're all on a journey. We all get older every single year, and our bodies change with that, because our lifestyles change. If you've got family, your children are getting older just at the same rate as you are. And all of that has an impact on you as a person, your energy levels, the way you're running your life, the way you might want to change how you're running your business. And that's okay. Like, we are allowed to evolve. We don't need to do what we've always done, but also recognizing that our health, as you said, it's not one size fits all, definitely not. But also it's not, okay, I've fixed that, therefore I'm done. Now I can push back into my business again. It is about having this kind of evolvement, this kind of continuous check-in. And I want to get your thoughts on that. But one of the things that I recommend for my clients is that at the end of every quarter, when they've been working through their goals, is that they have a sense check from a financial perspective. How's their business been done? But actually check in from your lifestyle perspective, your personal, your health. Have you been pushing so hard that you're feeling exhausted? If you have, something's got to change. We still want you to get those results, but you need to have that shift. If you've had an amazing lifestyle, that's brilliant, and your health goals are on track, that's great. Give yourself permission to, pat yourself on the back. But if you haven't got your business results, then look at tweaking what you're doing within your business. They're so entwined. But yeah, I want to delve into this kind of not being a finite process, because I think it's really interesting that so many people think, oh, I fixed it, I'm okay, I can push back again.
Yeah. So I've actually written 4 things down just from what you said as well. So hopefully we can get to those as well. So I guess in terms of it not being a finite process, one of the things I will say, and this seems to be a fallacy that's very common. People seem to think that that natural, so you know, I have a master's degree in Western herbal medicine among other qualifications, but so I can often help somebody feel better very, very quickly. But that's not the point for me. The point is, as you say, that it's not a finite journey. But here's an example of that. And this is a couple of years ago now, but it just popped into my head, so I think I'll share it. So a very successful female business owner contacted me because she was having a flare of an inflammatory bowel disease that she had. And so here's the first thing. She knew that she'd been going downhill for months. She'd been working from home instead of being in her office with her team. You know, it's very much not so much since the pandemic, but this was this the start of the pandemic? It's just before the start of the pandemic. So they were still very much she was in the business. She was out of the business a lot, but they were used to her being in and out, and she hadn't been able to get to the offices for months. So she finally contacted me, and I really need people to understand that I'm a clinically trained practitioner at this point. So she wanted to avoid having to take high doses of steroids and so on, which she'd done before, but which then had a knock-on effect in other ways for her health. So she contacted me because I, came recommended, and within 3 days, and please, again, I just want to be very, very clear, I gave her very strict instructions about when she would need to seek medical history if within the first 24 hours something hadn't changed, 36 hours, 48 hours, and so on and so forth. So it was, it was very clinically robust. But within 3 days, she was already feeling better. I think within a week from memory, she felt she could go back into the office. So she did a bit, but I was like, don't go too fast. Yep. Within the first month of working together, she had extricated herself from a business relationship that had not been working for her for 18 months.
Wow.
The amount of energy, and she didn't even tell me that, and when we first, when we had our first meeting, because it was all about, please help me with this, this issue in my gut. And the amount of energy that she had been utilizing, going round in circles, how to extricate herself from that relationship in a way that would feel positive. She just did not have the biological capacity to muster the energy to stand up to this person and say, actually, this isn't working for me anymore.
It's huge, isn't it?
Right?
And that's the ripple effect. That's the impact on your business.
So then within 3 months, they'd moved offices because she knew that the office space that they had wasn't working for various reasons. And she and her husband, who is also in the business with her, as like her day-to-day operations, chief of operations. He hadn't been able to get her to commit because, again, she didn't have the capacity to make the change. So then they were able to move offices, and so on and so forth. So this is the thing that people often think that I don't know, what do they think? That it's going to be too hard to make changes. But actually, if you've got someone beside you who knows what to do for you, and this is a perfect example of, as I say, what's going on in those organ systems, not allowing us to make decisions and have that, that ability to really go out in the world and do what needs to be done for our business, that it's very, very short-sighted to not engage the support of somebody, because that, that if you quantified that, I probably should have said to her, like, what is that worth in terms of, but in terms of the energy that she was saving from extricating herself from that one relationship. As I say, it hadn't gone completely sour, but it wasn't working anymore for her. It was working for the other party, but not for her. So, it is really important that some of my clients talk about me being in their pockets. you know, so I'm on a retained basis, and they know as and when they need, as you say, a quarterly sense check. Sometimes they're in a more intensive period and they want me there beside them, you know, more at a more accessible day-to-day level. Then, you know, if we're not viewing ourselves as the most important entity in the journey, as you say, the journey is the journey to take care of ourselves really lasts as long as we are here, because we are living longer and longer. And I know you would feel like this too, Sarah. You know, what we want to ensure is that our health span increases alongside our lifespan. Otherwise, we only spend longer being sick and not enjoying the full, you know, range of life, of our capacity.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a sort of, what's coming through in there is it kind of goes back to that awareness piece that we were talking about earlier, but actually it's about almost taking a bit of responsibility for ourselves as well, isn't it? And, you know, once we've got that awareness, then taking the responsibility of going, you know, that lady who you're talking about, yes, she took responsibility and she may, you know, she reached out to you, but actually, had she taken responsibility earlier and had that awareness of going, actually, I really, you know, being proactive with her health, she knew something was not right, but let it settle until there was a real problem. If we are more proactive and having that kind of, not necessarily a bodily check-in with ourselves, but we know our bodies the best. We know when our energy is off. We know when something feels off kilter. And we're not necessarily the expert in helping us sort that out or fix those little problems. But if we're proactive about that and seeking support from someone like you or whatever it is, that actually how quickly you feel better is tenfold, probably more than that, because when you start leaving things right until they're quite critical or there's a real serious problem, it takes a lot longer to kind of pull back from that, doesn't it? It isn't about this overnight fix.
Yeah, and it's much more complicated. Actually, I just remembered while you were talking that I recall that she had a team member in the office that she knew needed performance management, but again, she obviously physically hadn't been there to be doing it, and that was costing the money because he wasn't meeting the sales targets that, you know, they were anticipating. So yeah, and as you say, you know, in an ideal world, she would have been taking responsibility a lot earlier. I think one of the things is that I think a lot of people don't take responsibility for themselves when it comes to their health. I think within the Western, this is the thing, and within the Western paradigm of well, when I say health, it's essentially medicine, which is you get sick, somebody gives you a solution, a doctor gives you a solution, and then you just off you go. But actually, that paradigm is so narrow that it reduces, unless we are someone who thinks slightly differently around our health, it doesn't set us up to be accountable for our choices and how they relate to our health. Now, when you consider that 37,000 billion things are going on in the body every single second, you know, anything that we ingest, whether that is in our mouth, through our eyes, you know, directly into our central nervous system, those things and the things that we choose to not do that would be beneficial for those 37,000 billion things every second, we've got a lot of influence. But the system, the medical system in this country and in most developed countries is set up for people to labor under the misbelief that really it's a germ's fault. You know, it's all the fault of the germs, or it's the fault of their body. And really, there aren't any answers, because what they've got is so complicated that even the biggest, you know, specialist, most expensive specialist in the country doesn't know what's going on. Now, I'm getting a bit ranty now, I think. As someone who has worked with people who've been told by the medical system for nearly 20 years that there's nothing they can do about what's going on, I'll tell you that, as with most things around mindset, if that's what you believe, then naturally that's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, you know, and I think then on the flip side of that is we also have this attitude around, you know, that being healthy is somehow really difficult and not fun.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've seen me. I mean, I know we haven't been out on a night out before, and we should definitely do that this year.
Yes.
But, you know, if you talk to anyone who's ever been out with me, I might have a drink. I might not have a drink, but I'm equally fun, I think, irrespective. I maybe slightly more fun if I've had a couple of, you know, glasses of champagne, to be fair. But, you know, they think it's hard to make changes, but I think it's because often we make it hard. So, you know, at this time of year, people have made, you know, often made New Year's resolutions, but often, Sarah, they're trying to change all the things at once.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that somebody might not need a lot of things changing over time. But if we're trying to do it all at once, and if we have a lack of that biological capacity, which will mean that we have less mental, emotional, physical energy than we would like, then we are putting obstacles we are setting ourselves up for failure. That's the first thing. We don't pace. You know, people don't create a business and go, right, well, I'm starting this business today. By next week, I want to be 6 figures. That what they do is they create a strategy and a plan that maps that out in a way that will pace them to do that. And they'll have goals along the way. It's the same when we're making changes for ourselves. Last week with one client who wanted to completely overhaul, she's like, I want to completely change what I'm eating. I was like, okay, right. So she told me more about her life. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. She's like, what do you mean? I said, well, if we try to change your 7 days of eating from here on, based on how you're telling me you're feeling, you're going to be even more exhausted with all the shopping and the prepping and the, you know, all this stuff. I said, your goal and your capacity do not match. And that mismatch is happening so often, whereby we think, oh, well, I'll just do all the things. And it's often, again, still with women, it's often based around weight loss. And that's not to say that there aren't times when, you know, again, from a biological perspective, our body mass needs to reduce. Sometimes it needs to increase. Sometimes it needs to, as you would know, change in its, you know, fat and lean muscle and so on. But the point is that it needs to be paced. There needs to be, you know, in this particular woman's case, I just said, look, our first goal is to get you making a meal that takes less than 15 minutes to prepare once a week. And then I gave her an example, and then she came up with a solution that would actually also mean that she'd have a meal ready for lunch the next day.
And
then we integrate that, right? We give ourselves a chance to live that out, course correct if necessary, and then, you know, and then it's not as hard.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think there is. And you know what, this conversation doesn't come with judgment. This is about helping people to kind of move into their version of success. And where we're coming from is actually your health is so important, so intrinsic in that success as well. But I think, you know, as you said, it doesn't have to be hard. I think, you know, especially when we get to the beginning of a new year, people are like, right, I'm going to wipe that, you know, slate clean. I'm going to start from scratch or whatever it is. That actually that longer term effect, or even a shorter term effect, you're much more likely to have that, you know, habit stacking perspective, making those small changes, sticking to a couple and really solidifying those so they become natural to you. And then going, okay, I've got to that point, that feels, I'm doing that on an everyday basis. What then can I add to that? Because all of those things, like if you change too much, then you don't know which ones are working for you or not working. Some of them might be actually detrimental to you. So I'll give an example from my kind of personal perspective. Like I love my running, I love my hot yoga, but I know that if I do that in the evenings, it completely affects my sleep for that night. I have to do my exercise in the mornings. And it, you know, for some people they can do. I was talking to somebody the other day that, you know, they love going out for a run in the dark because that gives them, and they feel really relaxed after that. They can kind of have a bath and go straight to bed. That's brilliant. And that works for them. That works for their setup. For me, there is no chance I can do that in the evening. And that comes through trial and error, right? Like you have to try these things. And if I'd have said, right, the only time I can do exercise is in the evenings, therefore that's how it's going to have to be. If I want to exercise, I'm going to have to do it in the evenings. actually that knock-on effect of my sleep being affected, then my energy for the next day, my food choices and all the rest of it, that is actually more detrimental for me doing exercise in the evenings or hardcore cardio exercise in the evenings than it is if I did nothing. And I think it's actually recognizing the impact on your body of those little changes, and being aware of that as well.
Yeah, I think, you're absolutely right. Firstly, I would say what you're describing is ease.
Yes.
It needs to be done with ease, because otherwise, if we've made it more difficult than it needs to be, the first thing that we'll do is go when it gets hard, because let's face it, we all know that motivation doesn't remain high every day of our lives. So when that motivation dwindles, which it naturally does, if we haven't got, things in place with ease, then they become difficult. That becomes an obstruction. And then we look around and go, oh, well, none of my friends are doing this. It's obviously too hard. So I'm not going to do it either.
Yeah. Yeah. And that then comes back to that personal responsibility, those choices again, doesn't it? Of actually being aware of what is the impact on you, your bodies. One thing there, though, that social pressure is huge, isn't it? Especially in the social media world that we see, and we're, things like Instagram where it's all visual, we're seeing what people are doing. This, I think it's really interesting as to, that social pressure, not just from our friends, but actually what we're seeing online, we're consuming. But again, you choose what you consume. So I think it's, if that is triggering you, if you're finding that hard, just pulling back from that or starting to follow some other people who have potentially similar views to you is what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I do to a degree is I'll follow people that they're not triggering me necessarily well, sometimes they are triggering me in a way that I'm like, oh my God, I'm really triggered by that. But people that I am like, I admire them, but I also can see that, what they're doing with their physical body is like, so for me, when I'm moving, when it comes to exercise, for me, it needs to be fun.
Yeah.
So I love going out for a big walk we're very fortunate where we live, near the river. Sometimes we see deer, red squirrels, and it's glorious. And I find that really fun. We normally play tig at some point with the children. We look for to see what the beavers are up to, because there's beavers along the river. And that's really, that is a way of cultivating joy and fun for me. Another way, for me physically, because I'm not someone, I'll laughingly say, the best part of exercise is refueling afterwards. But what I'm doing is, I use a playfulness to ensure that when I do exercise, it's either, it's something that it brings me joy. It's playful, it's fun. So I'm finally learning this year how to do handstands with my husband, who, as you may know, is that's his kind of area, one of his areas of expertise. And also, just playing and being silly. And again, that's one of the things I would say is, please don't follow people who are taking themselves too seriously, because life is serious enough. And, this stuff, taking care of ourselves, it is kind of serious in some ways, like in the sense that it's really profoundly important. Yeah. Which is why I get so passionate about it. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be heavy. And if it feels heavy, this is what I would say, if you are starting to put a plan together for your own health and well-being, if it feels, stop and think about how it feels. And not think about how it feels, allow yourself to feel it. And if it feels heavy and it feels too much, and you're already starting to think about the challenges, then dial it down. I often say when I'm speaking, because I give a lot of information, choose one thing, just one thing, one change, choose one change, feel it, integrate it, tweak it, live it, and then decide if it's actually for you. And then, as you said, habit stack, bring the next one in, add it to what you're already doing, position it for success so it's attached to something else.
Yeah. So important. And I think, again, it goes back to this being aware, like recognizing what's going on for you, recognizing how those activities, whether it's movement, whether it's eating, whatever it is, having that fun, it's such an important, that joy, isn't it? I think one of those words that we've kind of lost a little bit through the pandemic, of actually, we are allowed to have fun. We are allowed to enjoy things, because it has been a really tough and challenging times. Yes, different for different people, as we've spoken about already, but finding that joy, finding those things that you get excited about, that's what you're going to stick to, because that's what brings you that happiness. And actually, then you feel like you're not really, when something doesn't feel hard, you actually do more of it. So it has that positive spiral. And again, it just, you kind of stick to it a lot more as well. And then you notice the effect on how you're feeling, but also those business results start coming in as well. And that's really kind of what we're, kind of bringing it back to this sort of healthy business idea, is actually, it's not one or the other. They're so intrinsic, and you performing at your best level means your business can perform at its best level. It's not going to have to stop because you're so poorly that it is about stopping. One of the things I also wanted to delve into is actually, it's not about if you're really sick, is it? Like, it is about that regular check-in and you performing in a really optimal way, that, like, not waiting until you're really sick. We're not talking to people who are necessarily really sick or are on that brink of burnout. This is about every day. This is about how you can be your best version of yourself, I guess. That is about putting you first.
Yeah, it is exactly that. I mean, because I've got the clinical background, I do, and I can work with people that have got diagnosed issues, and a lot of time those people know, or come to an understanding, or come with an understanding of, they've had a time to reflect, to understand the role that they've played in that, alongside, genetic predispositions and things like that. But it's really about getting the most out of this experience, as they say, don't they? What does it say? Well, none of us are getting out of here alive. So, why not enjoy our lives as much as possible? And again, my experience with clients, I remember once when I used to work in a 5-star wellness spa, and I rang the wellness team. And I remember a woman sitting in front of me. She was about the same age of me. So we must have been at the time, probably late 30s. Actually, I think she was fractionally younger than me. And I was talking about, building her biological capacity and so on. And she actually started to cry. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. What have I said that's made you feel like this? And she said, well, I'm just married, so I'm in the happiest place I've ever been in. I've just had a promotion at work, so things are going really, really well. So I just have this physical stuff going on. It was a lot of skin stuff for her, and that's the thing that I want fixed. I was like, okay, well, we'll concentrate on that. And so I made her up some bespoke herbs. And I think I gave her a supplement at the time. And it was interesting because probably 8 or 12 weeks later, and we had a follow-up, and she sat down and she said, because I'd said to her, I think, it's really about you experiencing a kind of expansion of your biology. So not only will your skin issues go away or radically improve, probably, in this 3-month period, but you will start to notice other things going on emotionally and mentally that are improved. So she got to the end of this 12 weeks and she was like, I didn't really understand what you were talking about. I just wanted you to fix my skin. She said, but now I've got more energy. I'm laughing more with my husband, who's actually said, wow, like you're coming home from work and you're actually laughing. Whereas before you used to come home and it wasn't that you were grumpy exactly, but you definitely were quite tired and a little bit frayed around the edges.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yeah, and also, she's like, and my periods change, and it's not as like uncomfortable, and I don't feel as drained by it, and all this return on investment, if you like, that then becomes a return on in a for her, she was employed, but it certainly up-leveled her experience, which I would suggest then went on to up-level her performance. And the same for our businesses, that if we're living with that additional capacity, then we kind of, I don't love the term resilience because it's problematic, but we could perhaps talk about that another time. But it does increase what most people consider to be resilience, which is, in terms of the capacity to be able to continue to keep on keeping on, which, as I say, we need to kind of unpack that a bit more. But ultimately, it leaves us in a place where we have more of a reserve to draw upon should the proverbial hit the fan, which, it will, whether that's within the context of our personal life or our business life.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think actually just building on that, you're in a much better, is probably not the right word, but you are more capable of dealing with those curveballs that are thrown at you, because you have that mental capacity, you have that kind of clearer thinking, you have that energy to kind of go, okay, this has happened. You don't necessarily go into, it's the kind of that growth mindset piece, isn't it? That you're not in the victim state of going, this has happened to me, the world is crumbling. Of course, those moments happen, but actually how quickly we move out of that, how quickly we look to find solutions from that, comes from this partly resilience, but also how we're looking after ourselves, plus that mindset piece, I think, as well. But you're right, that's probably a completely separate episode that we could kind of delve
but
really,
you're
really
right though. Essentially it's the broaden and build theory, whereby the more, certainly on the in the positive psychology space, which I know you're trained in as well, on that aspect of things, the more that we foster positive thought processes and positive experiences, the more we will be, the more they'll, becomes a self-perpetuating prophecy in a positive way. And it's the same biologically, actually, in the way that our body works. If you take the immune system, for instance, the more that our immune system is working optimally, the more that it can then take what would be considered to be a new, take, for example, virus as an example. If you have had exposure to one type of virus, then, and the immune system is working really robustly, then you have your immune system has an expanded kind of cognizance to recognize elements of something and almost get creative to go, well, I don't know all of that, but I recognize that bit and I know what to do. Yeah. So it's an expansion throughout the layers. And it's just such a beautiful thing to watch somebody flourishing, through all those layers. It's an absolute privilege.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think it's, as you said, it's one of those that we're all striving to have success in whatever form it is. We go back to that kind of success, definition is so personal. But actually for me, and what I hear from so many clients, is it does include health, it does include happiness, it includes that freedom to choose. But what I see so many people do is they focus on the business, the actual, pushing so hard to try and get the business results. When actually, if we look at this kind of equilibrium of you as well as your business, that's really when you're going to achieve that version of success. Because yes, we can hit financial targets, but if you're so exhausted, or I don't know, it's having an impact on your relationships, or it's having an impact on your health, that you don't feel that success in the same way as if you're really excited and you've got that energy and you've got that flourish, was a brilliant word that you just used then. And it is about that. It's about flourishing, I think.
Yeah. Well, as I say, it's absolutely about flourishing, because that to me is the word that really encapsulates this broad and expansive experience whereby we elevate our day-to-day quality, because we can absolutely have those big goals, and but ultimately, Sarah, day-to-day life is largely made up of very small moments. And so if we elevate our experience of our own experience in those moment by moment, like those ordinary moments, then that has the ability to elevate our lives. And as I said, it doesn't mean that you can't have those big kind of, what people would think, I guess, to be more traditional goals, but understanding that when the shit does hit the fan, going back to the pandemic, if you are someone who has learned how to, you know, who is flourishing, I would say, and I don't mean this in a, you know, I hope nobody takes this the wrong way, but, you know, in some ways, like the pandemic was challenging for me, don't get me wrong. And at one stage we did seek some very specific support for our family in the context of our family. Again, that's a story for another day. But ultimately, like my mental, emotional health, it wasn't really adversely affected to the degree that many other people were experiencing. And I put that down to the fact that, you know, I've been working on myself in the ways that I've been talking about for over 20 years now. And so that's the return on my investment.
Yeah. And also I think it goes back to that it's not a finite journey. It is constantly evolving, you know, especially as women, I think, you know, we go through, whether you've been in the corporate space or you haven't, like that brings its challenges. If you're commuting all the time, travel, I know that's what led to my kind of corporate burnout, was that I was doing some ridiculous travel when I was living abroad. Not from a social perspective, more from a kind of business travel perspective. But it looks glamorous from the outside, right? And then actually you kind of hit this knock-on effect. Or, you know, whether it's even becoming a mum, like the way your body is impacted so massively on that. Not just I remember being in a group of, you know, very new mums and in our sort of antenatal group, and some of them felt this massive pressure to lose weight so quickly. And I was like, actually, it's taken 9, probably 10 months to put that weight on, for our bodies to evolve, get used to that expansion. Why not give yourself a break and give yourself that 9-10 months to go back the other way?
At
But
least.
it's hard. Like there's so much judgment, especially if you know, I was breastfeeding and all that kind of stuff. And it's, let alone the lack of sleep, let alone all the other stuff that comes with being a new mum and the massive learning curve that goes with that. But, you know, there are pivotal moments in every person's life, you know, whether you've got children, you haven't, whether you've been in the corporate space, you haven't, there are pivotal moments that come in that mean that we have to shift our priorities slightly. But actually, if you're focusing on yourself first, and this is what we're really talking about today, is you can help people so much more. And that was, for me, that was the catalyst of me leaving the corporate world. It was the catalyst for me setting up my own business. It was the catalyst for me becoming fully booked, losing that flexibility, not being able to help as many people, going, I need to change my business model. I need to change this because I want to still give back. I still want to be healthy. I still want to be happy. And I can't do that if I'm still doing it in the same way. So, I mean, my path has completely evolved in so many different ways across 20 odd years, but that's okay. I think it's giving yourself permission for that as well, of kind of in a non-judgmental way. Like I think hopefully we've kind of got across, this isn't about judging. This is about you kind of being aware. And, you know, it is hard. I think, especially as us women, we are very judgmental of ourselves. We're very probably self-critical, overanalyzing lots of different things, but actually trying to take that holistic view of you, what it is that you want to achieve, getting that plan in place can make such a huge difference.
Yeah, I think, you know, what I would say finally is that, you know, coming back to what you're saying about, you know, being critical and so on, I've had a very long battle with my inner bitch, as I call her. And it's really about coming to a place where we recognize, as I say, that we need to foster a relationship, or we will really benefit from fostering a relationship with ourselves that is based on respect, self-reverence. And if you're not even sure where to start with that, you know, I always say to my clients, when you find yourself, you know, you hear yourself with the self-talk and you're berating yourself, think about what you would say if your best friend shared this experience with you. What would they say to you? And then use that love and respect and reverence that your best friends have for you and give that to yourself.
Oh, that's such a great, I feel like that is a great place to end. It's so important, isn't it? Until the next time, of course, when I feel like we've got so many different topics to delve into. But yeah, I think hopefully people who've been listening to this have really gained so much from recognizing that actually you can have a huge impact on your business results if you're putting yourself first, but also that ripple effect on, you can help even more people. You can have better relationships with your family, your friends, make clearer decisions. but not leaving it until the point where it becomes quite serious. Taking that really proactive approach, taking some responsibility, I guess, to really put yourself first, not in a selfish way, in a purely you can help more people as by helping yourself first.
I
Louise,
concur.
thank you so much for joining me. I've loved this conversation. And I think also, one thing I wanted to add in here is that we don't get it right all the time, right? Like, we make decisions, we make choices. I will eat really rubbish food on occasion, but I know the impact on that. So then I will, make the changes again the following days after that. I will have days where I'm not able to do exercise, or I have to only do like a really quick 10-minute HIIT session or something. But that becomes my choice, and I get that. And so I think it's, also kind of, yes, we're coming from a non-judgmental place, but we are making decisions on a daily basis that will impact everything as well. So it's to kind of reassure you listeners that actually it's an ongoing process for us as well. So even though we have that knowledge, we are still making those decisions on a daily basis.
Absolutely. So I would just finally say that in the lead up to Christmas, I made a decision for the 6 weeks, I think, before, to every day go to my kind of local little members club thing, and have a sauna and a swim, like three or 4 days a week. And I did that, and it was fabulous. It's now January the 24th. Have I been this year? No. But here's the thing. What I haven't done is thrown the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. I have other things that I'm doing instead. Is it exactly what I want to be doing right now? No, but that's because I knew that January I was going to hit the ground running on the work side of things after, 3 really good weeks off. And so like you, I'm getting up 3 times a week and doing a 20-minute session. And then through the day I do, I've got my slam ball over here, which I can hurl around. I've got a kettlebell. So again, it's about context, making sure that what works at one stage, even 1 month, may not work the next month. And that's where having somebody alongside you to provide the objectivity, and also to set you up to continue to feel like you are successful around meeting your own, goals for yourself, can be absolutely a game changer.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Healthy Business Podcast. Obviously, you have your book, You First, which I know is available on Amazon, but also on your website as well. So let us know what your website is and where people can find you if they're wanting to connect with you a bit more.
Sure. So you can buy my book on Amazon. If you're not an Amazon person, which I know some people are not fans of Jeff, then WH Smith, Waterstones, anyone watching in the US, Barnes & Noble. And then my website is louisewestra.com. And please go over and connect with me there, or feel free to email me, louise@louisewestra.com. And I respond personally to all my emails.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me, Louise. It's been an absolute pleasure. I feel like after this, we'll be needing to get another couple of episodes in. And actually, on that note, if you are listening to this and want us to delve into a specific subject area, please do leave some feedback. We're always open to hearing your comments and your thoughts. So for now, have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you on the next episode.
Bye.